Okay, so in this particular next part of the scene, we have Porcello, Piggy, who is becoming more and more frightened, as we can see through these two images. And eventually in this image right here, the lights are going to turn off. And then all of this fog from the outside that we established earlier is all going to start flooding in through the window. So that's kind of portrayed here in this area. We have a close-up shot of him right here, which I've already sketched out, even closer with his eye, kind of a Dutch angle shot from behind him, seeing the fog roll in, another kind of medium shot, him freaking out, and then this final shot here, which is going to be a silhouette of Piggy, the window in front of him, fog still rolling in. So this whole page is meant to kind of, how should we say, build suspense for whenever the ghost arrives. And in this particular snippet of video, I'm going to show you my inking process. So if you're wondering why everything's already sketched out, it's because we've already established what the sketching process is like on the previous page, and then on this page we'll get into inking. So in terms of inking, I really just use one type of brush. Let me put it over here so you can see it. It's just, I named it Best Inking. So what I like to do whenever I use an inking brush, and this is for any type of regular brush or one that's more of a dry brush that's used for inking, is that I take the brush and then right over here in this section of the Photoshop brushes, it's automatically at this kind of height right here, where the circle is like a full circle, right? But when you bring it down like this, you can see on the bottom what it does to the actual brush. So it actually really thins it out and kind of almost heightens the pressure a little bit, which you don't have to do this, obviously. But in terms of the way I like to ink, I really like to use that as an effective source of making it just look really smooth and nice. So I'm going to go ahead and skip this certain section for now, because I've outlined this as being a panel in and of itself, but it really does cover the full background of the page. So what I'm going to have here is obviously the window, the fog rolling in, all this is going to be black, and then the fog is eventually going to fade into black. The reason why I'm not going to cover that right here though is because all of this smog, all of this fog and smoke that is going to be flooding in through the window, a lot of that is going to be taking place in the actual coloring phase. For some elements, I like to not have to ink it. Traditionally, I like to paint it in there, so you get kind of like this element effect where it feels a little bit different and it doesn't clutter the image too much. So we're actually not going to ink the fog in this little tutorial, but I am definitely going to take you through the process and show you what that's kind of like. And something else that I also like to do is bring in a panel from a previous page already completed. And I did take you over the process of how you sketch this out, or how the process of how I sketch it out. But I like to have this just as reference. So whenever I'm working on this particular page, I can have color reference, line reference. As you can see, the TV is kind of giving this very harsh blue light, but the shadows being cast isn't from top down traditionally, that you can see that in a lot of artwork. Right here, it's going to be from the opposite direction, so it's actually going more towards his chin area, hence making the bridge at the top of his nose actually fairly dark, as well as above his eyebrows and such. So I like to keep that there just as reference, so that whenever we do get into the inking, I can maintain that similar style and that similar value and value as the previous image. So I'm going to take you through the process and we're just going to get right into it. So what I like to do first off is just kind of get down what are the darkest elements of this piece, or what are parts of the piece that are, I think, most important. So his eyebrow here is really going to emphasize the way Piggy's feeling, right? And it's also going to be a dark part of the image, so having both of those things be included, I'm going to take you through the process here. His eyebrows are fairly thin. They're not very thick. They're very thick towards the midsection, but as they kind of go out, they become thinner and thinner. So we'll have that in here. Now, one thing you might notice in terms of the way I ink things, I keep it fairly rough. I don't try to connect lines exactly or do anything like that. I have done styles like that before and it has looked fairly cool, but I think for a story like this, a comic like that's very focused on these elements which are harrowing and dark and gritty, I felt that the actual style for the comic in terms of the inking could also be a little bit chaotic in that sense. Not everything has to be extremely streamlined. We can have elements here and there that are a little bit imperfect because that's kind of the way Gotham is in general. So again, this isn't the only way to do a comic, but for this particular comic, I did think it would be best to have it play out in that sort of sense. And what's really cool, something that's going to happen between this panel and this panel, is that you're going to find that once in this panel the lights turn off, we're going to have the actual values change. So like I had mentioned before, in this panel we're going to mimic this lighting. So we're going to have the lighting come from the bottom and we're going to have the shadows kind of cast upwards, if that makes sense. But as soon as the lights come down, I really want to change it completely. So I want to have it be dark here instead of have it be light here. I want the bridge of the nose to be bright and I want the bottom of the nose to be dark, which is the opposite kind of value that we have going on over here. And we'll get into that after I'm done with this particular panel. I do like to go panel by panel. I like to finish one and then move on to the next. I don't like to do multiples at once. Some people do, and fair play to them, but for me, this is just how I like to work in particular. And a lot of this, frankly, is just based on practice. With lines like this, when you get those smooth lines instead of chicken scratch where you want to make sure that everything is exactly the way you want it, you have to learn to be kind of loose with it. Because the looser you are with your line work, the more confident you are, rather, it really does show in the final piece, and it really brings elements to life. So if any of you are nervous to try and make something perfect, just know that it probably will never be perfect, and it's just better to try and get the emotions across. It's kind of the most important thing. As long as you can get the reader to feel what you want them to feel or think what you want them to think, then you've done your job as an artist. At least that's how I think of it. People could probably disagree with that, but yeah, right here you can see the light's coming from this way, so the top of the bridge is going to cast a shadow on his cheek here. Same with this line here. What's fun about this particular character, I found when sketching him, is that since he is on the heavier side, there's a lot of meat to play with. It sounds gross, but it's true. You can really play around with the folds of the skin and really accentuate certain elements, which is pretty fun. Again, I know it's kind of a gross thing to say, but it's true. It's really, really true. When drawing a little bit thicker characters, you can really play around with a lot, which is fun. So what I also like to do, just to make sure we're on the right path, I can sometimes hide the sketching layer and then just make sure that the inking is solid. So I can already tell that on the left side it's not really as dark as I want it to be, so I'm going to leave the sketching out just for this section. I'm going to increase the darks just a little bit on this side, up the contrast in a sense, to really show where the light's coming from, and I think that already is beginning to look a lot better. But yeah, I don't do that too often, but it's good to check occasionally. And then also, of course, as I mentioned in the previous tutorial of sketching and stuff, you can really tell if something's working or not if it's flipped and it still looks okay. And to me, this still looks okay, so we're on a good track right here. So I'm quite happy with that. All right, and then now we're just gonna move on to this area. If I'm being honest, these little dots right here, I don't know if they're food crumbs or if they're little hairs. You can decide that, because I just put it there because I just wanted him to really seem like a disgusting character who like does not take care of himself. So I don't quite know if those, I know on his chin here, these are most certainly little hairs. But in terms of his upper lip, actually not quite sure. It's up for debate. And a little practice whenever you're inking, you can do cross-hatching and things. I mostly just like to do hatching. I don't like to cross-hatch too much because I feel like you can get things really busy really quickly. Down here you can see that I did cross-hatch, but it's so dark you can barely tell. A lot of my lines are mainly just hatching and not cross-hatching. And if any of you are wondering what I mean by that, this is hatching, right? And then this is cross-hatching, so you're going over it twice. So I prefer just to hatch. It's just personal preference. You can do whatever you please, but that is kind of what I prefer. Just like that. And we're gonna have little hairs here. And once I get into the coloring stage of this page, I might add little white hairs too to overlap the ink to really bring that out a little bit more. But for right now, I think it does the job well. And although I do like to focus on some things first, a little trick I've learned is that oftentimes whenever I draw, or when I used to draw, I like to draw the things I know best first, and then draw the things I don't know best last. And you shouldn't do that. You should really try and get the stuff that you don't know very well, or the harder things, out of the way, so that you can finish off strong and really look forward to the stuff you do know and love to do, which is eyes and mouths. For me personally, I love doing eyes, love doing mouths. But whenever I'm doing side profiles, I love doing noses a lot. But here, since we're looking at them straight on, I like to do the eyes and mouth last because it's my favorite part. And a lot of the emotion comes from there too. So if you get that right, if you get an ear, if an ear looks wonky or something, or, you know, if something like that happens, if you get the main elements right, again, it's all about making the audience feel what you want them to feel. And if you can express that through a few facial features and don't need to hone in on all of them, then that's okay in my book. It's obviously good to practice everything and know everything really well, and I of course do that. But I find that saving the best for last, when inking, coloring, any of that kind of stuff, can prove to be beneficial in a lot of ways, at least whenever I do it. Could be different for you, but that's how I feel about it. I'm gonna get rid of the sketch again, just to see what it looks like. I think I'm gonna make this area here a little bit darker, this area here a little bit darker, just so the audience can really tell where the main source of light is gonna hit this particular character. Now you can kind of tell where I'm going with this. Alright, and then also a little trick that I've learned. Whenever you're doing eyes, I wouldn't recommend doing something like that. You know, with a lot of times when you look at eyes, there's so much detail and so much highlights in there, and you can kind of scribble it out. So this is the iris right here. I'm leaving this space open for the actual highlight to come through. And since he is staring closely into a light, I'm gonna be very thin with the outer light here. Maybe a little bit on top to give the impression that it still continues. But then if you get rid of the inking, the sketch, I love the way that looks personally. I think that is a lot better and really portrays the emotion that I'm going for. And then here, with the mouth, I'm gonna have the outline of the top lip, just like this. And we're gonna have the bottom lip come in here. And then really add that shadow here. His teeth are also messed up. Similar to another character in the comic. And I'm sure as I continue, there'll be more people with messed up teeth, because they're fun to draw. Batman will not have messed up teeth. But yeah, there you go. You can kind of tell if there's teeth are a little bit messed up. I'm not the kind of person, or artist rather, that whenever they draw teeth, I count to make sure that the number of teeth work for realistically how many teeth people have. I kind of just do what looks right. So I don't know if any of my artworks have more teeth or less teeth than the average human, but no one's called me out on it yet. So, all right, now looking at it from a little bit far away, I am going to hide the sketch again, and I think that looks pretty good. And there are certain areas that I will keep in mind for whenever we get to, or whenever I get to, the coloring process. Because there are certain shadows and certain highlights that can be accentuated even further, but I don't want to do all the shadows and all the highlights with the inking, because then what's really the point of having color be there? But yeah, I am happy with the way that looks. I'm now going to move on to the next phase, which is going to be when the light is at a different position. So I'm going to move on here. And we're going to have the light cast from this way down. I really like to play with harsh shadows a lot. So as you can see, I upped the brush size a little bit, so I can really kind of portray that the light is now coming from the bottom. I mean, the light's coming from the top, so the shadow's being cast on the bottom section. Now, whenever I'm sketching, I have one hand sketching here, and I have my other hand, which is down on the keyboard, and I'm constantly increasing and decreasing the brush size as need be while I'm working. You can't really see that process very well, but I am doing it, so I just thought I'd let you know. I'm now going to move on to the nose here, because I do want to have a really nice dark line work there. And then I do want to showcase and like here you can kind of see that this here might be considered cross-hatching. I don't know. I like to mainly just hatching is my preferred. But hey, if you like to do cross-hatching, like here I'll do some cross-hatching. If you like cross-hatching, by all means, go ahead and do it. I think what really got me into inking whenever I was a kid, what I really liked was, if any of you have seen the kids' book, Where the Wild Things Are, I feel like that book is a great example of hatching and cross-hatching in that particular style. That live action movie was weird though. I remember watching that live action Where the Wild Things Are in the movie theater as a kid, and it freaked me out. Really messed me up. Did not enjoy it at all. I bet as an adult though, if I rewatched it, maybe I'll notice some things I didn't as a kid and maybe appreciate it a bit more, but whenever I was a kid, it was not my jam. Not my jam at all. I did like the book, obviously though. So here you can kind of tell the shadows are a little bit different. So you can see the lights from the top, so we're casting the shadow down here. you know, in this area, a little bit here, we'll add some more. But on this image, you can have the you can have the shadows be cast up here and up here to really show that the light's kind of coming from the bottom a little bit, just a little bit. So I like to keep that in mind whenever I am sketching in things. I really love playing with negative space too. Like with here, like look, there you go. There's his eyebrow, you know? You don't have to be super detailed with it or anything. You can tell just by the way the markings are that it's a different texture than the skin, you know? You can just kind of tell. Obviously, whenever we add color and stuff, it'll be even easier to see. But if you can tell what an image is supposed to look like when doing a comic, if you can get the message across without color, that's good, because when the color rolls around, it'll only influence the piece more and make it even more dynamic. But yeah, as you can see, I'm a little bit rough with my inking. Some areas I spend a little bit more time on than others to make sure they really look the way I want them to look, but honestly, I don't like to spend too much time on it, because if I do that, if I do like this slow all the time, I mean, to me, this doesn't look as good as this. There's more emotion here than right here. But I guess you can also say that comes down to personal preference again, so you can do whatever you want to do, but whenever I ink on my own projects, that is the way I like to do it. I like to go fast, because I think that it really helps accentuate a lot. But yeah, now as you can see, I'm kind of just using my previous panel over here as reference for how the skin folds and everything. But still making sure that we know the light is indeed coming from the top instead of towards the bottom, like it was in the previous image. Obviously the lighting and the color rather is going to clearly show that the lights have been turned off, right? But again, if you can showcase that even just through inking, or at least give that impression, then that's kind of it really does help the piece as a whole, I'd say. All right, so we're getting pretty close to the finishing touches of this particular panel. And I think what I'm gonna do is, after I finish this one, on the next panel, I'm gonna speed things up a bit. You might not hear my dialogue. You can kind of just see how I work in a super fast, speedy time lapse. So you don't have to hear me talk as much. Then you can also kind of just sit back, relax, see me continue on doing what I love to do and how I like to do it. Okay, so now that we're back, we are going to move on to the next portion of this, which is going to be this panel right here, which is a medium shot of Porcello looking very frightened. Same value, lighting rather, as these two images where the light's coming down on him. And we're gonna have some fun with it. And I'm really excited to get to this one because technically you could say this is our first our first full body shot of Porcello, but since he's kind of in the distance a little bit slouched, with the kind of a 3/4 profile view of him, this is really gonna be our kind of very first look at Porcello. Obviously no legs, but with a good amount of detail and looking kind of straight at you. So the most important thing here is the emotion that he's feeling, but then also making sure that the audience registers that the person who's in this image is like the same person who was in the previous images and such. So we just got to make sure to make that known, make it clear. Don't want to make it hard to understand. So right here, since he is leaning over a little bit to the side, I'm gonna have the shadow be in this area rather than like somewhere over here. So we're gonna see how that looks. As you can see, even in my sketches, I do kind of have that layout of like, I have some hatching over here, but very loose, very, very, very loose. Just so that whenever I get to inking, I kind of know what to do. Or remind myself of like, hey, you're gonna have shadow here, you know, so make it look good. But yeah, I'm excited for this one. I'm already having a lot of fun. I've barely even done anything, so. But yeah, the first thing I like to do is just get the main shadows done. Just get the main stuff done in there. I'm gonna get rid of the sketch real quick. I think it looks pretty good. I love doing the folds in his neck. I know it's so gross, but it's like so much fun. So much fun. I don't follow the sketch exactly, as you can probably tell. Now, if you're inking a comic book and you're not the penciler and you're just doing the inking, chances are you want to make sure that you portray whatever the penciler was doing to a T. But since I'm the only person working on this, I can kind of take a lot of creative liberties, so I don't have to stick to something specific, which is great because I feel like that can kind of weigh down fairly quickly. As you can see, his teeth, he needs to go to the dentist. He does not have good hygiene here. Let me get rid of the sketch. You can kind of tell what I'm going for here. That looks pretty good to me. Alright. Yeah, this is, I think the inking section might be my favorite part of making comics. Just because you can get a lot of really cool values and shapes in there. You can go really detailed, but you can also kind of take your time with some sections. Sketching is probably the most difficult because you're starting off, sketching. You're kind of like testing out ideas, and a lot of the times they don't work and you have to rethink a lot of things. But whenever you're inking, it's like the idea is already there. So all the main hard work is kind of already finished. Now all you have to do is just follow through. I think that's why I like it the most. Can't forget the hairs on his chin. I think that looks pretty good. And if you are wanting to do character design, by the way, just off the cuff, off the hand, if you want to get into something like that, please, 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 please study anatomy. It is so incredibly important that you do, because if you don't study anatomy, you won't know the right way to stylize certain elements of the body to make it look good if you want it to be more cartoony. So it's very, very, very important. I am lucky enough to be able to go to college, well, go to college period, but go to a college that actually is all about art. And I am forced to learn anatomy and stuff. And I was a little bit nervous at first, but the more I did it, the more I really liked it. And it's so important. It's so incredibly important that you do, especially if you want to do stuff like this. It's just, you will gain a lot of great things out of it. But yeah, I'm really liking this a lot so far, and I figured I would. But as you can see, like, the sketch looks like this, and the inking looks like that. So as you can see, the sketch really is a guideline for how I want to do inking. It is not a line-for-line process. It is very much so an outline for what I want. In the inking stage, my favorite stage, you really, really get to accentuate everything that you wanted to previously. And again, like I mentioned before, if you're just the inker, or even if, you might not like the idea of having to come up with things while you're inking. Maybe you do want to be super detailed with your sketch and then just follow through inking and just trace everything. And you're more than welcome to do that. But I find whenever I ink, this way is not only quicker and easier for me, but it's also just more fun. So I like to do it this way more than any other way, really. Yeah, working on this comic has been a real joy. It's a real passion project, basically, because I'm such a big Batman fan. Getting to actually work on a Batman comic like this, it's just super fun, and it takes place in the same universe as Matt Reeves' The Batman, and it's just so much fun to kind of be a fan like I have been for so many years, and kind of think with the writer Joshua and talk with him and really kind of outline some things here and there and what we want to do and what his ideas are and how we're going to communicate that through panels and things. It is not an easy job by any means, because you have to make sure, as stylized as comic books are, ultimately this is a fan comic which is meant to take place after the Batman film. Since it is a film, we have to make the comic effective both as a comic book, just by itself, just as a comic, but then also as a sequel to a film. So you can't stylize something or go too far out with certain elements if it doesn't make sense to what was before it. So it's been a kind of a tough balance to make sure that we're treading on the right areas here and there. But as we go on, things just seem to get easier and easier and more fun, which is great. Not to say that there aren't new challenges every time we do this, but it certainly is just really, really fun to work on. But as you can kind of see, getting back to actually talking about what I'm doing, the main light source is kind of coming down from this way, but whenever I do add the color and everything, it is, color is going to be be very important for these next pages, because since it does, like, all the lights are turned off basically, the lighting becomes a huge new character in this scene. You have to make sure to portray that in the best way possible. But yeah. Sometimes I'll do this, where I just fill certain areas with black, because I know that I'm going to be doing that anyway. It just makes it a lot easier later on. And what's great about having this take place at night is that a lot of these details in the back can be implied and don't have to be super detailed, which I think adds to the mood, but it also, if I'm being honest, just makes my life a lot easier, because now I don't have to draw every single detail and waste my time brick by brick, literally crafting an apartment where we know the focus is not on this apartment. It is going to be on the fog, on Porcello, and on the ghosts in these next pages. That's where the focus is. The environment's important, don't get me wrong, but it is definitely not the most important thing in scenes like this. So you're allowed to be, at least I feel I'm allowed to be a little bit messier than usual with it. But yeah, as you can see, I created the lasso tool to kind of follow around him so that whenever I do these sketches, it doesn't interfere with the previously constructed line work and such. Which again, just makes my life easier. So yeah, inking I would say probably takes the most time to do. Even you know, when I do it fast and everything, it still takes up a lot of time. But even the fact that it does take up a lot of time, it's still just so much fun to do. It really is. And then also, since we're gonna have the purple smog and smoke fill this room, basically, what's great about that is a lot of the brighter areas are gonna come from the smoke itself. And I think that effect, when we get into it and coloring, is really gonna help bring out everything that much more and bring more visual interest, which I'm super excited to play around with. But for this page in particular, I'm just going to take you through the inking process as I have been. We're not really going to get into coloring on this page. We're going to get into coloring on another page. The reason why I wanted to showcase the inking on this page, though, in particular, is just to showcase how I deal with different lighting scenarios. Mainly talking about this one from earlier, how that big change will really aid later on. But yeah, I hope y'all have gotten a kick out of this and really enjoyed hearing me talk about the process, because it has been a lot of fun. I don't normally do tutorials or take people through the process of how I do things. People have asked me to, but I find that I'm pretty good at drawing. I'm not really good at drawing and talking, so I hope that anything I've said has made sense. I think it has, but you'll have to be the judge of that and watch. But yeah, there you go. So that's, I think, that panel done and done. Make this a little bit thicker, just a little, so that you stand out against the back a little bit more. There we go. That feels better. Awesome. Okay, so the last bit I'm going to take you through is going to be this final panel here, which is going to be a big silhouette piece, which are so much fun because they are the quickest to do, and they also give off just such a cool effect. So basically what we're going to do is have the line start here, show a little bit bumpies right here to showcase his shirt folding over him, little ears, big bald head. And then now that all that's connected, I love this so much. I love just filling in areas like this. It's my favorite. Boom. Don't tell me that's not so incredibly satisfying. I love it so much. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it, I love it, I love it. Also, what I just noticed, it looks like his shoulder becomes the chair over here in this other panel. That was not intentional, but I can definitely say, or lie, that it was. Because I'm pretty proud of that, actually. Did not mean to do that. I'll be honest. If you're wondering why I'm not drawing some of these sections, is because I don't want to have to draw where the smog and folk is. And folk? My gosh, I can't talk. Smoke is, because that's going to be covered up anyway through the coloring effects that I will add on top of the inking. Now, usually for coloring, I'll have the majority of the colors all be underneath the inking, but for extreme lighting scenarios or for instances like this with smog and folk, oh my god, with fog and smoke and such, I make sure that it goes on top of the inking so it can really accentuate, and it really looks like it's almost like breaking through the harsher elements, which can give off a really cool effect that I really like. But yeah, I think we're almost done here. So thank you so much for sitting through this and for listening to me talk about how I like to ink. Hopefully it'll give you a little bit of insight, and if not, I hope it was at least entertaining seeing me work. I'm pretty used to seeing myself work, so I'm interested to see what other people think about it. But yeah, so that is this page, pretty much inked, except for this top section, which I'll do off camera. But I hope you enjoyed. I certainly had a lot of fun going through this with all of you, and I can't wait for all of you to see the colorized version of this, the final version of this page, and the rest of the pages obviously in the comic book. And then right after this, we're going to move on to a different page, and then I'll show you the coloring for that other page. But again, thank you for watching me do this. I had a lot of fun with it. I'm really liking this scene so far. I hope you are too. And I will see you on the next stage, the coloring stage.